So thanks for coming to another Power Apps night class. And today we're going to look at business process flows. Like I said before, I've make sure I've covered the content by looking at the Microsoft official courseware. And I'll go a wee bit further on this one because they didn't mention much about them. There's only maybe 2 slides of the Microsoft official courseware on business process flows, but I find that I use them quite a lot, and customers tend to really like them. Just a few the usual we'll start with announcements. Feedback forms I've put the link in the chat as well. Please provide us with feedback. If there's anything you like, if there's anything you don't like, it just helps us to make the sessions all the better. First announcement, in case you haven't heard, Scottish Summit is on Saturday. This Saturday, all day event. Has anybody got a session? Is anybody doing one? Nobody got a session at Scottish Summit? Oh well.
I've got one.
I've two.
Oh, you got 2 even.
Yeah.
Give a plug for your session. What time is it on?
I have no idea. I mean, I do. I think. Where is my phone? Where is my phone? Oh, that's a good question. Oh, okay. Just continue. I'll find it.
No problem. I think that's the same as most of us at this point in time, where everything's so moving at such a pace that I'm forgetting what day it is. So Scottish Summit on Saturday, 27th February. If you've not got a ticket or you don't know what's going on, just go to the website and find out what's going on. And look, there's a whole day of sessions, how they're learning ahead of you. 9th of March, so we're pushing Matt's, because it clashes with Ignite, Matt's flow surgery. So we're pushing that back a week to the 9th of March instead of next week. So we've got 2 weeks before Matt's flow surgery, where we'll be collaborating with and try to solve a community problem via Power Automate. And then 16th of March, we've got Laura Graham-Brown giving us an introduction to Power BI. She did say there'll be Lego and homework. So I'm really intrigued about what that'll be like. It's actually one that's requested from our members. I think it was Gary Pope requested this one. So Laura's coming in. She's a Microsoft Business Application MVP, a specialist in Power BI, and she's going to teach us a bit about it. And then the next night class is not in March because I'm on holiday. Maybe do something else, but I'm not going to commit to anything. But it's going to be 27th of April, and we'll look at reporting within Dataverse. So again, we'll aim at kind of entry-level reporting in the Dataverse. So on to business process flows. We'll cover today what they are.
Sorry, Paddy, before we start, Gulshan has raised his hand. Have you got a question? Oh, not anymore.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to ask, what topic is Matt covering?
We don't know yet. The thing with the flow surgery is that we don't tell him till the last minute. He has to pull something together. Sorry?
A mystery round.
Yeah, if you've any suggestions, we've had 2 suggestions in actually in the last week. So normally what I do the week before he goes on, or sometimes even a few days before he does it, I send him over the suggestions and we sort of pick one. So if you've got a suggestion that you want to Matt to tackle, the idea is that we go in kind of semi-blind and try and solve the problem together. So if you need to just ping me a message in the chat and I'll get Matt to have a look at it. So business process flows, we're going to go over what they are. We're talking about stages and steps. We'll talk about branching. We'll talk about automation, and then we'll very briefly talk about Canvas apps. I put this in as the last bit because I was going to try and work out a cool example of using it on a Canvas app. It turns out it's a lot trickier than what it is. So if you are here for the Canvas apps, I'm probably just going to supply you with a link to a video of somebody doing it because it involves custom connectors and everything, and I couldn't put it together. So the Canvas apps bit will be a link because it is very difficult. It's going to be just a few slides, which I've more or less, there's some cool diagrams in the Microsoft official courseware, and then I'll just get into building them. in an environment. So what are business process flows? It's these things along the top here. So this, when you in a model-driven app, if you see that along the top in a model-driven app, that's what a business process flow is. And each of those red dots represents a stage in the process flow, and then each of the bits underneath, these are steps. And steps normally are linked to fields, columns within a table. And a business process flow can span over more than one table as well. So you can start a business process flow in one table, and then the next step of the business flow may be in another table, and it links through a relationship. As you progress through each stage, the idea is that you progress through using this next step. Click the next step, it moves on to the next step in the business process flow. And then you, the one thing to note is that they're not wizards. I describe them when I speak to clients about them, I describe them as a soft prompt. So they're used to guide the users through a process rather than enforce it, because you can skip on to the next stage, you can populate the form, and you can even change the business process flow within the app. So they're not mistaken with as wizards. And one of the most important things they can do is branch. So you can have conditional expressions in there. And for example, this one, again, I've just taken this example out of the official courseware. If the car preference is new car, then it can branch out and take you down a different route to complete the process. As if it wasn't a new car, it can take you down a pre-owned car sale process. Some miscellaneous notes that I thought were important, really because, again, go through the official courseware, there was quite highlighted that you can only have 30 stages. Now, I remember years ago when they first came out, I was doing exams on them, and there was a question about how many nested if statements a business process flow can have. So the fact that they're highlighting that in the courseware, that is very important. I mean, know there's 30 stages, then it may mean that that's an important one for if you're doing any exams in the future or something. So there's a maximum of 30 stages. Why you would have any more than a few stages, I don't know, because they take up quite a lot of screen real estate, but you can have up to a maximum of 30. You can have multiple concurrent business process flows on a table. So if I open an account and a business process flow starts, I can change the business process flow. I can have those business process flows running simultaneously on that record, and I can also, my other point, security role enabled, I can show different processes flows to different users depending on their security role. And then in the background, they have a supporting table. So when you create a business process flow, it automatically creates a table in the background to support that business process flow. And that table contains some lookup fields and some time fields as well. There's a few other fields. And the good thing about having a supported table, and I'll show you this just in a second when we go through a technical run through, is that you can run reports and everything off it. It's a table just like any other table. You can run reports, you can run cloud flows, classic workflows and everything off changes to that table. So I'll just jump in and I'll take you through business process, because that's probably the best way of showing you. So what I've done, just to make things a wee bit easier, I've taken out, well, I thought it would make things easier because it was a nightmare taking out a trial, but I've taken out a Dynamics 365 customer engagement trial, it's still called. It's for sales, the sales app. So we'll look at the sales app, because that originally, that ships with a few business process flows pre-made. Just to show you the business process flows, how they work, and then we'll start building some more, but you can use them on business process flows on just a Power Apps license. You don't need Dynamics. So I'm just going to go into another opportunity. So it's a model-driven app. That's what we're working on just now. If I go to an opportunity and open up a record, you'll see the red bar along the top. It tells you the name of the business process flow, and it tells you the active stage by the little target thing. It tells you how long it's been active for. And if I click on any of these little circles, I can see these are the stages. These are the steps. So I can see the steps, and I can see that they link to attributes or columns within the record. If I populate any of these steps, I can go and look at any stage, but if I populate any of these steps and scroll down, it'll populate the field on the form. So I can work through the process, and you'll see in the out the box business processes that ship with first person apps, these mark as complete. If you've got a checkbox, you can tick them. Interestingly enough, I only found this out while today when I was looking at this session in the official courseware. If you apply a PCF control to the form, it'll appear also in the business process flow. So this can contain PCF controls as well, which is interesting. I've not tried it, so I can't show it, but that's really interesting, the fact that you can show them in the business process flow. And so the current process, the current active stage of this is the proposed stage. The idea is that you guide your users through a predefined process. Anytime they can click the next stage to move on to the next one. And then once they get to the end, they finish. And that's the process finished. And as you see what I mean when I say it's not a wizard, because sometimes these get used as wizards, you can change whether these fields are mandatory or not. And if you change them to mandatory, it doesn't mean the field on the form's mandatory. It just means you can't move on to the next stages to the business process without completing that field within the business process. So I've seen them used. One of the common things that happens is that people use them as wizards, and they just make just about every field mandatory. And there's nothing wrong with doing that if you want to enforce a process, but always remember that people can turn them off as well. So up the top here in the command bar, you can, if I can find it, there should be a process button. Yeah, that's it there. I can switch processes to a different process, and that comes back to what I was saying, and that a record can have multiple processes running at the same time. So if I've got two processes for an opportunity on record, I can switch and I can start a new process from there just by selecting it. So we'll look at, I'll take you through a business process flow from the start, and then we'll look at how it's built up in the background, and then we'll just create a new one. And we'll look at some of the automation that you can do between the steps as well. So with the Dynamics 365 sales app out of the box, it ships with two business process flows, probably a bit more as well, but two main ones: the lead to opportunity business process flow and the opportunity business process flow. The one we'll look at now is the lead to opportunity one, and that starts from a lead. So when you create one, you specify your primary entity, and then anytime you create a new record that's related to business process flow, you get the business process flow along the top. And so for this new leads record, they're asking for this information. So you go ahead and fill that out. Again, none of that is required at the moment in here. And give it a name. And I can't move on to the next stage without saving it. So I click save. And if you notice that this spans multiple entities, so this spans the lead entity, and then it goes over to the account entity, the opportunity entity. And because there's no opportunity record associated to this lead yet, these are all locked. So I can see what's required of me. So as a user, I'm in Dynamics 365 for sale. I can see what's required at the next step in the process, but I can't move on because there's no record to move on to. And that's because the next thing I need to do is to associate it to an opportunity. I can create a new opportunity from here. If it was just that sometimes the process you've got a plus sign, so I can create a new record. But with the lead process, the next stage in the process is to qualify it. So when I qualify it and automatically create an opportunity, it'll allow me to move on to the next stage in the process. And if you see now, I'm actually on the opportunity form, and I can go back to the qualify and view the lead, which is now closed as qualified. Or I can go to any of the other stages in the process and view the opportunity. And that's that cross-table functionality that it has. And so I would go through, populate my business process flow, the next stage. I can also click a stage and set this as active. So even if I move on to the next stage, I can always go back if I've missed something. Regardless of whether that stage is complete or not, I can still go back to it and change things. So as again, it's a soft prompt, it's not a wizard. I'm going to keep emphasizing that because one of the things that happens with business process flows is you can show one of them, especially a new client who's new to Dynamics or Power Platform, and they love it, and you start seeing processes getting created everywhere and have multiple stages, and them all being enforced with mandatory fields. And then people just, as much as it helps user adoption to begin with, you find that if there are loads of mandatory fields, people will just fill out the form and then close the form off without actually following the process. So we've got a process on lead, we've got a process on opportunity. We'll go ahead and just create just a very basic business process flow on opportunity, just to show you how it's created and show you some of the options. You have to create them, and this has only changed recently from the classic interface again. You could create them from the modern interface last week. There was a problem. I know this because there's a problem with them. When you create it from the modern interface, when it creates the support and entity in the background, support and table in the background, it doesn't pull it into the solution. So I don't know whether that's why they've moved it, because I had loads of automatic release pipelines failing because every time someone created a business process flow, it didn't pull the table in. So at the moment, for now, as from this week, you have to create them from within the classic interface. Well, before we start creating a new one, we'll just look at the one that's there, the one that we've just looked at, this lead to opportunity sales process. So it is under processes in the classic interface as well, so same as classic workflows and flows. And this is what our business process looks like. These are our stages. And if we click on each of these, we can give it a name. We can also give it a category. That's an option set that's in there. You get the categories put out for the sales app and the customer service app. I tend not to use categories in my custom apps, so I just leave it as it is. You can leave it blank. And if we expand each of these stages, we get the different columns, the steps relating to the columns. And we can, if we click components up here, we can drag in more steps, and that gives us access to our columns. So always click apply. I always forget to click apply. If you're doing it, building one quickly, I'll go away and I don't apply, and then when I come to save it, it fails. But then we can delete steps. Let's just delete that one out. And as we can see, this first stage starts on the lead. So the entity table is lead. The second one goes to the opportunity. So if you're creating a business process flow that spans multiple tables, when you get to add a stage for the table, you just need to specify the relationship, so the entity table and the relationship. And you can, there's a few different tools in here. The connector one, again, I've not seen that. I don't know whether that's a new one. I've not actually used that one. But you can add components from here. So you can add data steps, workflow steps, and add stages. And I'll talk about automation in a second, because there's a few differences with the automation that you can add. You can also cut. You can only cut. I found that you can only cut steps. Can you cut stages? I actually don't know myself. Yeah, you can cut stages as well. Tried it earlier, I couldn't. But you can cut and paste these, because you'll find that as these get bigger, it can be quite repetitive. So you can cut and copy and paste them to different parts. And this is called the canvas. You can view a mini map of it, and you can also view. There's a bit here. And we change it quite frequently. You can used to be able to expand it and see quite a kind of smaller view of the full process if it was quite big. Let's see if we can do it now. And I can take a snapshot. A snapshot is a screenshot of the business process flow. Also, all it does is it creates a PNG image file. Interestingly, when you create these and you make any changes, if it's already active, you don't need to publish customizations. So you can go, somebody can go in, make a change, and just hit update, and that'll update the business process. Any active business processes flows that are in there, that'll update those business process flows straight away. Validate, that just shows you if your business process is valid. So if, for example, like I said earlier, I add a step and I don't hit apply. So typically I would do that and forget to hit apply and go away, and I hit validate, it'll come up to say that it's not valid. It also validates it when you activate it or update it though. And then you've got order, process, flow. So this is quite important because if you've got multiple processes that start from the same table, this is the order they'll be displayed in. So when you create a new record, the one at the top will be the one that appears by default. And they can also be enabled for security rules. So I can choose to only show this processes to certain users that have specific security rules. So let's go ahead and create a new one. We'll leave that one as it is, and we'll create a new one on the opportunity record. So click new to click new process, and we'll just call it Paddy's opportunity process. It's a business process flow, and you always choose the entity or the table that it's going to start on, and we'll start it on opportunity. There's two types of business process flows: classic, business flow and task flow. I haven't ever had to use task flow. It's been so long since I've used it. You get a list of tasks in the unified interface to tick off. I maybe did a bit of study for the exam as it came out, but I've never had to use one, and so I'm not going to cover it. It's not in any of the coursework either. I don't know anybody who's used it. If anybody's used a task flow, then I'd be happy to hear what their experience is with it. And this gives you the name of the table that will be created in the background. So because I'm calling it Paddy's opportunity process, a table will be created called Paddy's opportunity process in the background. And let's create it. So we get our canvas and we can set the stage name. So let's just call it new. And again, hit apply. I'm not going to set a category on it. And we can add, what we'll do first, we'll just save that and activate it. Now, interesting as well, when you save it, the table doesn't get created in the background. It's only when you activate it that the table will be created. So if I hit activate, oops, I need a step. So
Paddy,
add a, yeah.
There is a question in the chat also from Tomasz asking if opportunity stages can have actions only instead of data steps. So I suppose this is an opportunity to check that out if you haven't.
Yeah, that's a good shout actually. So just an action, so just like a flow step or a action step, Thomas.
I was thinking about a flow step because I believe that action step is something more, something different. Now I was just thinking now that if you can create a business process where you don't have these steps related to inputting data and blah blah blah, and just flow, but I have no idea if you do have only flow steps, how will it proceed from one action to another, from one state?
Yeah,
from one stage to another.
The flow step's an interesting one because potentially you could, but if you'd asked the question to say workflow steps, then the answer would be quite easy. It'd be no, because you need a data step before a workflow step, because workflow steps come under these triggered processes. Action and flow steps actually create. I'll show you what they do. So in this business process flow, I'll put an attribute on it, and then I'll make the kind of process flow fork to do either a flow step, an action step, and a workflow step. And I'll show you the differences between them. That is very interesting. So we'll try that now actually. So if I put a flow step right at the top, I wonder if I can remove that. I don't think it's going to let me remove it. Oh no, maybe. So there's my flow step. I've created flow, a workflow, and an action in the background. And all they do is close the opportunity as one, just so that you see it does something. So I'll hit apply. You might get away with it with a flow step.
Now, I just wonder now, this flow step, I mean, the flow that is called via the flow step has to update data somehow, right? So that the business process can proceed, I mean, advance to the next stage.
Yeah, so I'll show you the flow. I'll run through it, and then I'll come back to this one. I'll show you what happens with the flow, because I'll show you the flow that I've created, because you've got it's triggered from the CDS current environment connector trigger, but it's a different trigger. It's the business process flow trigger, and it doesn't. You can't pass data to it. So I set up parameters unless you actually type in the parameters. So I'll show you what this looks like. What I'll do, I'll activate this and I'll show you what it looks like now. If it will let me activate it. I've tried it with workflows and it doesn't let me do it, but flows maybe.
I believe workflows are executed on the exit of the stage, whereas flows, you have to click execute.
Yeah, flow and action are very similar. You have to click an execute button, and then flow will prompt you. So if you've got parameters in your flow, then it'll prompt you for the parameters. Of course, that's no good if it's a good that you need. Because then the user has to know the good. You can't pass the parameters to the flow step. So it's let me activate it. Let's go back to opportunity. I'll just create a new opportunity.
And then for the triggering the business process, can you trigger it from like via the HTTP request or by changing the dataverse, or is it always that you have to trigger it manually?
So you can trigger it via Power Automate. So you can trigger it via a cloud flow. Essentially, what you do is create a new table and a new row, in the background of the table that it creates, and associate that. I've done a lot of work on that just now. And there's an action as well. So there's an unbound action that you call that says set business process flow on this record. And so what we've been doing recently is we've been getting to business process flow, and then we've been chaining them. So when you get to a stage and the active stage changes, it activates another business process flow. And it changes. It doesn't change synchronously, so you need to refresh the screen, but it changes the business process flow depending on what you do. But I can go over that as well.
Could that not be used? There's a scenario that I encountered in the past, which was if you've got a lead to opportunity process flow. So sometimes you've got a lead moving through various opportunity and then various opportunity stages. And then they sometimes want to start exactly the same process at the opportunity stage. Yeah. So you would have to configure almost identical business process flows with multiple stages with exactly the same steps in them, except one of them starts on lead and the other one starts on opportunity. And I think you can probably use that so that you can start on lead and then have an automatic switching over to the opportunity process flow when it moves on to the opportunity. And then you only have to configure the opportunity process flow once. Would that work?
It would work, but it wouldn't happen in real time.
No.
Because you can change it in real time, but it's a bit fiddly and it doesn't work all the time. So we've really tried it because it's real-time workflows, so it's real-time classic workflows that'll change it if you create the record in the background. But I found it in some instances when I've been testing it, you get errors.
Well, I did that with classic workflow real time, but it was kind of hit or miss. But the idea was that once it moved into opportunity, in that particular use case, they were going to go off and do something else. So by the time they came back to it, it would definitely be embedded. But but
you can, if you call the action from the cloud flow, then you can certainly set it based on values or based on another business process you're finishing. The problem is it doesn't have. You have to hit the refresh button to see it on the screen, and you have to delete the previous business process flow because some users will still see that. So what you need to do as well, so when you create a business process flow as well, this is something that catches me out a lot, you need to add it to the app. So at the moment, if I try to change so if I save that record and I try to change the process, I can't see it. So my new one, my Paddy's one, won't be visible because it's not added to the app yet. So you only see business processes that are added to the app. So if I go back to the Sales Hub and add that one, and under there we go. Yeah, that's something that catches me out as well, because I think, why is my business process flow not working? And it's because I've just forgotten to add it to the app.
When you add the business process flow to the app, does it add the entity to the app, or is that immaterial?
No, it doesn't. You have to actually add the entity. But if you're doing it through Classic, it'll automatically add the entity as soon as you create the business process flow.
Okay.
If you're doing it through Modern, which you can't seem to do from today, it won't let you do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So if we change that business process flow, we should see my business process flow now. Paddy's opportunity process, and let's have a look at the behavior here. So we've got a very basic process flow on the top with one stage, and we've got one step, and there's our flow step. So when we hit run flow, I think that's a wee bit clunky. So it gives you the name of the flow that you're going to run. If it had input parameters, it would ask you for the input parameters. The problem with that is that you can't pass any input parameters to it, Thomas. So if I'm saying close opportunity, I had to do a step in that flow to get the opportunity ID from the business process flow before I close it.
So you have to do it manually again.
No, so you have to do it in your flow. So if I have a look at that flow, that's the one there. So this has no input parameters, but
because like my idea was that the business process flow is more like a controller of the stages, but then the stages and the beginning of this business process flow is all like happening automatically. Like you can trigger it automatically somehow via the Dataverse or scheduled or HTTP request, and then once it reaches a stage where this Cloudflow is present, and the Cloudflow is being triggered automatically, and then once it completes, for example, then the business process flow advances to the next stage. But I think I answered my own question that this is just a different use case, and it's not what business process flows are meant to be.
Yeah, so you can't automatically trigger that flow without actually clicking the button, which is a shame. So classic workflows work like that, so you can trigger them as they enter and exit steps, but you can't. You have to actually manually press that button. So for the flow, I have to get the output of this action, of the trigger, is the business process flow stage entity record ID. So I need to pass it the ID, but I can't pass that any other parameters. I can create parameters to pass it, but unless I actually type them in when it asks me for the flow, I can't pass them from the business process flow, which is a shame. So let's get this thing out of the way. So we'll open up the business process flow again, and we'll add another few stages and steps into it, and then we'll add some conditions as well. If I can find it. So what I'll do, I've got a option set choices field in here that I will. So add a data step, and this is just a next action data step. And it's just really to demonstrate it branching off. I'll remove this one just now. So we have a stage with a title of new, a data step, and I've forgotten to hit apply again, as I always do. We'll make that required. And then we'll add a condition here next. So the condition is going to check the value of next action. And you can check any of the fields on the form. So if it's an action, we'll call an action. If it's a workflow, we'll call a classic workflow. And if it's a cloud flow, we'll call a cloud flow. So an action, if you're not familiar with model-driven apps, is very similar to a classic workflow. It's a bit more powerful. You can kind of go and you can put and it takes input and provides output parameters as well. But again, you can't pass them from the business process flow, unfortunately. So if we add another stage, and we'll call that stage the action stage. We've already got a data step in there. Put an action, we'll take that data step out. And we'll put another condition. And the same sort of thing again. Next action equals workflow. And we'll put another one in as well. Let's put one for none as well. And just so now we've got our conditions in there. We've got one that's going to call an action, and the action that we're going to call is one opportunity. The next one, we will put another stage in, and we'll call a workflow. And notice when you add the workflow stage is a bit different from the action and the flow one, because it can trigger when it enters or exits the stage. So if we say that stage entry, that'll be the trigger of the flow. It's quite useful because if you use real-time workflows, then it can trigger that workflow and it'll go off and do something, and the user will see it on the screen. So a good example of this is something I'm doing at the moment when it goes and automatically routes a case to somewhere, and it tells the end user where the case is going to route to, and they see that on the screen, so it doesn't happen in the background asynchronously. So we'll choose a workflow, and you also have to have a data step for flow. So I'm just going to put the owner in because that will always be populated. Give it a name, and you'll see what I mean. I've forgotten to hit apply again. I'll add another one in there, which is oops. Let's move that one up there. I don't know why I can't add anything to that one. Because that one should be there, but we'll save it anyway and see what it looks like. Yeah. delete that bit out. What have we got? We've got some more errors. Okay, so that's us got 3 conditional expressions and 3 conditional steps. One we'll call an action, one we'll call a workflow, and one we'll call a flow, or allows the option to call a flow. It can be quite fiddly, this interface, especially the bigger you get with them. And as I said, you don't need to publish it or anything, you just need to hit update, and then that'll be it there, changes there. So let's open our Sales Hub again. Oops, that's me, did it? And we'll get an opportunity. You'll see this one's already got an active business process flow there. It's at the last stage. Let's change it to our one. So it's only got one stage at the moment, but the step is a required column, and I can choose the next step. So if I click action, I get another stage, which allows me to call the action, and it changes depending on what I select. And so if I choose the next action to be action, and an action is very similar functionality to the flow, you have to push the button. It'll asynchronously call the action, and then you'll have to refresh the page to see the results of the action. It should just close the opportunity. It's not done it yet. Yeah, so it's closed it as one. So if I reopen that, and they all do the same thing, it's just that they do it in different ways.
There is one little bug in here. If you have a look, or at least I experienced, I don't know, I've not noticed just here. So when you do use the action to close the opportunity, it closes the opportunity, but the status field at the top, does it actually remain in progress as it was showing before?
That's a good shout, Larry.
Because I was having that issue there.
Should try again. The problem with the action and with the cloud flow as well, the flow step, is it doesn't give you any indication when that it's completed. So I've clicked finish there, but if I do a cloud flow, it will just always remain in processing. It won't ever come out of processing, whether it's successful or failed. Oh no, it does. Yeah.
It actually updated, so it was bug on mine only.
I found it sometimes as well when I create. I mean, that's a separate issue. But when I create these business process flows just lately, they must be doing some work on them. The next steps sometimes aren't there. I have to delete it and recreate it again for the next stage step to appear. But that's happened more than a couple of times. And yeah, so the workflow, when I enter the stage, let's just save it. I've actually finished this one off. But if I just do a new one. I'll change the process again. if I choose workflow and click next stage, it runs the workflow before, so I don't actually have a button to press here, it just runs it automatically. And in real time, you would see that change if it was a real-time workflow. Since it's an asynchronous workflow, it happens in the background, so you have to refresh the page to see it change. To show you what happens in the background here, if I pull up an advanced find, yes, it's 1. And I'll bring up the table that I've created. So the name of the table that you create is, there we go. I've opened up Paddy's opportunity flow. You'll see the name of the entity it creates up here. So I'm going to expand this. So it's created this entity here, KO_ Paddy's opportunity process. And then if I look at advanced find, I've got a table. I should have, called Paddy's opportunity process. And the columns on that table, I've got one for active stage, which is a lookup to the active stage. So every stage that it creates will create a record within that active stage table. It's got status reason I created on. I'm not sure what the process column is, but you can because this is a table just in the Dataverse, just like any other table, you can run reports on it, and you can run cloud flows off of the update of these tables. So when the stage changes, if the stage equals a specific stage, then you can run automation off the back of that. And you'll see that these are the records that have been created. As I create the business process flow, it creates the record for that table in the background. Interestingly enough, I can't click on it to view the actual business process table. When I click on it, it will take me to the primary entity that the process is running on. And so that's it within model-driven apps. That's about the extent of them. Within Canvas
Paddy,
apps, like
Angela's got her hand up. For some
Sure,
time,
yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah, for like 20 minutes.
This is why I need a moderator.
No, I didn't want to interrupt.
Just cut in.
No, it was just to say that I've read that the task flows are deprecated last October. So that's why I've not seen any reference to them in training materials, etc. It's saying they'll be replaced by the immersive experience for business process flows that is planned for release. Dun dun dun.
Can't wait.
I presume that's what they're working on.
They seem to be doing quite a bit of work on it because, like I said, things change. Like that's just disappeared in the last week, and my next stage buttons are really temperamental. They keep disappearing on me when I create a new business process flow. I can't see them, and so now what I have to do, I always have to create a really small one because the only way I can get them back is just to delete it and start again. And so if I spent hours creating a big business process flow, it has to be started again.
I'm going to check mine because I've done one just in the last couple of weeks, so I'm going to check the tables in the solution.
I've had them not show up at all, and I've had them just the buttons not show up. So somebody watch over, create one with just one step first, and then once it's created, you've got a next stage button. Finish it off.
Okay.
If they're obviously doing something with them, they're bringing an immersive experience. It's about time as well. This is build. Canvas apps, business process flows. So I did read that you could do some Canvas apps. I had some capacity to look at it today, and I was hoping to show you them because they look really cool, but they're not as easy as setting up on model-driven apps. They're if I open up, there's a really good blog article. I'm just going to direct you to this. I'll put it in the chat. And there's a video and everything on there how to do it. Essentially, it's a custom connector which uses the CDS Dataverse REST API to go and get all the information it needs. But you can see how they can look really cool in Canvas apps. But like I said, I was trying to, because the app and everything there's to download, and you can kind of dissect it from there. And I had a go at it because it's created a component which is essentially the business process flow. But it just seemed a bit too much just for an intro class, a bit too deep, and I couldn't get it to work either. So that was that. But definitely worth having a look at that blog if you're using business process flows within Canvas apps. That's it from me on business process flows. Is there any questions, comments, or anything?
Yeah,